We have so many stories in our lives, but our stories are not always heard. On the Hear My True Story podcast, we tell our own true stories.
Before the white car parked, our head teacher had scattered. Looking at him, I could only see his tie that was flying backwards, waving at us, and he disappeared in thin air.
I want to share my life story. I want to share my voice with the people because I know that just a small joke I can tell through this podcast, it will make someone smile.
When you ask me what I fear most in life, I would definitely respond to you and say it's fear itself.
We are fighting for togetherness. We are fighting for equal rights. We are fighting to end injustice.
You don't have to be a storyteller or writer because, guess what? Life writes the best stories.
Hear my true story.
This is your favorite time of the week with your number one podcast.
Hear my true story.
Yeah, our dear listeners, we are happy to have you today on the Hear My True Story podcast. It is me, your host, Otako. Today is quite a wonderful day, special. We have a guest from Kampala, Uganda, international artist. He has done a lot of collaborations. He has done a lot of international exchanges and is a well-known artist in Uganda. But however, we shall be talking about collaborations. Do you want to do collaborations between Africa and Europe? Are you an artist? Are you a producer? Do you want to hear experiences? Do you want to hear ideas? Today we have a lot to talk about. Stay on and listen to this episode.
This week's special guest on your favorite podcast.
Hear my true story.
Yes, Robert, could you please introduce yourself?
All right. First of all, I'm so happy for the invitation, Otako. I'm really happy and delighted to be here. This is my first time on your broadcast, and I heard about it some time back. A friend of mine sent me one of the podcasts, and I was listening to it, and it was really interesting. So I'm so happy to be here. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sempija Robert. Some on social media know me as Sylar Robert Sempija, a Ugandan contemporary artist. I'm so delighted to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm happy to have you also on the podcast. I'm so excited what we shall talk about today. I look forward to it. So, Robert, I would like to ask you, what are some of your successful stories as an artist?
Wow. I think, success is, everyone have their way of looking at what is success and what is not, I think for me, one of the most successful story that I will tell you is that I'm earning a living out of something that I'm happy doing, Some people will look at it some people will look at success as how much wealth someone has achieved or materialistic things that have gained. But for me, it's more of, success for me is I'm doing what I love, passionate about, and I'm earning a living out of it, I can afford to buy myself a meal.
Okay.
So for me, that is the success that I can talk about, because for materialistic stuff, that comes as a plus. But yeah, I would say that I call it black privileged. I have traveled around the world,
How do you call it?
Black privilege.
Wow. Why do you call it black privilege? Why?
It is, you will see that there are not so many black people that will have a privilege that I have.
Mm-hmm.
I have a privilege that I live in Uganda. And for example, someone will buy me a ticket, I come to Europe, perform, and then go back. You know, once I even traveled to US for only 3 days. I traveled from Kampala, I went to US for 3 days, I performed, went back to Kampala. That is black privilege, you know, for me.
For
and
you.
Yeah.
I mean, why is it privilege? Like, because, I mean, maybe there are listeners who would like to know why you call it like that.
Yeah, I'm looking at it that way because I know a lot of great artists from the continent.
Yeah, from the African continent.
From the African continent who have not been able to get the exposure that I've got. You know, and for me, every time I'm performing, I present my work, I'm not only performing for myself. I'm performing for the rest of the continent that is there. You know, it's like I'm representing all of them. So I know my work is very personal, you know, at a certain stage. But when I'm always doing it, I'm doing it for my personal reasons and experiences, but I'm also doing it for thousands of voices that are not able to be on the same stage with me. So when I'm on this stage, I make sure I also say something for them.
Yeah, I get that.
That's how I look at it.
Okay.
But of course, there can be other perspectives of looking at it.
Okay, so yours is clear. Like you have a privilege to travel around the world, and I am from Uganda too. I understand that.
Yeah.
And one of my reasons that I decided to become an artist is because I wanted to travel. I mean, but yeah.
Yeah, you know, the thing is, I was talking to my wife some time back, and I told him that traveling has been one of the great educations that I've received in my life. You know, because when you step out of your comfort zone, in this sense, I'm stepping out of my community that I grew up in Uganda, has allowed me to see more perspectives on how I look at life.
Yeah.
You know, when you go to US, one of the most overrated countries that I've been to, that can also be another conversation.
Yeah,
but
of course.
When you go to the US, there is another way of looking at life, you would see.
Yeah.
I would tell you, Otako, before I traveled, the first time I went to Europe, this is in late 2014 or 2015, I cannot remember very well. But I stepped onto Brussels airport.
Yeah.
I looked out of the window, and for me, I felt like I'm inside the TV.
Why?
You understand? I was like, I'm watching a movie.
Okay.
You know, because I look out the window and I see these tall buildings, but you know how Europe is very organized. I always say Europe is so organized, they need some disorganization.
I mean, the structures, everything is really clear. Yeah.
These structures, you see, and I was like, at that point, actually, I'll tell you, Otako, I knew that something is not right. I didn't know what was it, but in my head, I was like, okay, something is not right. It is either not right here or on the continent. Because by the time I came to Europe, I've been to Senegal, I've been to Kenya, I've been to Rwanda, I've been to Tanzania.
Yeah.
And I think I had been to Mali or Niger somewhere.
Yeah.
And Burkina Faso. So I was like, okay, something is not right. And it's either not right on the continent or it's not right here in Europe.
Yeah.
It's like, no, it's not possible that these people are living this way.
Well,
by the time I came to Europe, I had never lived in a house with a toilet and water inside.
Yeah. I really understand. Wow, people are really the life here in Europe is different from the life where we are born in Uganda, in Africa.
Yeah. So I was like, you imagine they took me to a room and they told me, so this is your house. This is the apartment where you're going to be living. What. And I have a kitchen. I have a toilet inside, running water. I have a bed. I have a fridge. And I'm like, no way.
Yeah.
So you can understand that is the culture shock that I had.
Yeah, I mean, that can be really another conversation.
That can be another conversation. Right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So as if we continue on, as in you've said some of your success stories that being able to earn a living from this, that's a successful story for you.
Of course.
Yeah. If I would like to ask you in the remaining few minutes, what can someone do, an African artist who wants to do international projects, what would be your advice for them? That's one. And to add on that, what would be the advice for a producer, maybe in Africa or maybe in Europe or in the US, and they want really to do collaborations with other artists from Africa?
Yeah.
Yeah. What would be your advice?
Wow. I would say that, there are so many factors, of course, to look at, but I would speak as if I'm speaking to an artist from Uganda, because this is the space I can understand, I can relate to.
Yeah.
You know, one of the key factors in this is research.
Yeah.
You know, I always told, when I talk to Ugandan dancers, I always tell them, how many dance festivals do you know from East Africa? You know, and I'm like, it's like, this is the funny thing I used to tell artists back home. I tell them, some Ugandan artists are like politicians who want to become presidents of Uganda, but they don't even know the current president.
Yeah, I get that.
You understand?
Yeah.
They don't know the current president. They even have no idea of the history.
Yeah.
So I always tell Ugandan dancers to research. If you want to, for example, if you want to be a good artist, one of the things you have to do is to try to really educate yourself in the field that you are in. Not only going into the studio and rehearsing.
Yeah.
I think it was 2016, when I met the choreographer that I told you about from Berlin, he told me something that changed everything, how I work.
Yeah.
He told me, Robert, if you spend 5 hours in the studio, you should spend then 8 hours doing research and reading.
Okay.
Because then you're going to gain knowledge about what you're doing.
Yeah.
And of course, I can understand in a Ugandan setting, it can be also a privilege to sit down and read and research about your work. You know, for example, I was talking to my friend. A friend of mine came to visit me in Kampala, and he found out that I have a lot of books about art and politics and stuff. And we were counting how much money I've put into the books, and it was around 3 million.
Yeah.
And I was like, and I told him, I can understand not every Ugandan dancer can afford to buy these books, you know. And some of the books I've bought them in the US, some have bought them in Europe, some have got them as gifts, you know. So the time that you put in doing research about your art, it gives you also understanding of where you want to take it. And also knowing who is doing this, sometimes I always say that it's also a part of who inspires you as a person.
Yeah.
You know, who do you look up to? You know, you see, for example, you want to be the president of Uganda, but someone who inspires you is, for example, is doing a taxi driver. Oh. I'm not demeaning the taxi drivers, but you understand.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. Like before you
For example, for me, one of the greatest artists that I know is called Stormy.
Yeah.
Is a Belgian songwriter and a producer. He's I was listening to his interview last time, and they asked him, who are the people that you really think drove you into this? And he was talking about Kanye West, which was very shocking to me. You know, I was like, wow, Kanye, okay, interesting. You know, so yeah, I would encourage an artist, especially on the continent, to do a lot of research.
Yeah, so you just saying artists in Africa, in Uganda, research about something that you want to do, then it's really good. Okay.
Yeah, no, researching will give you more information on who are the people that are in the field, and it will give you an understanding of how the system that you are in, how it works. For example, in business, they will tell you, never invest in a business that you don't know, that you have no knowledge about. So it's the same thing with art. This, you want to take it as a business, then invest in it on understanding how it works, not only going into the studio and creating.
Yeah.
You may be in the studio creating, for example, art about celebrating life. When now life has moved on, people are doing works about going to Mars.
Yeah, you are right.
You understand?
Yeah. So research is really plays a very big role.
For me, it has been the key.
Yeah. Okay.
It has been the key understanding to understand the field.
And does that apply both to artists and producers of the?
Yeah. I would say it to both.
Now I want to ask you another. Maybe like if you really have something else other than research, what else can these people do? The artists and collaborators. As in,
you know why I always want to stick to research, because research leads you to a lot of doors.
Okay.
You know, research leads you to a lot of doors. Research is like because a lot of Ugandan artists or producers, you would see that they are good in what they are doing.
Yeah.
But all they need is manure.
That's the research.
That's the research. And I was reading a book from a philosopher. I think he was a Chinese philosopher. He said something very interesting. He said that knowledge and wisdom are overrated, and the understanding is underrated. So you would see that a lot of artists and producers from the continent have knowledge and wisdom about their art, you know, but the understanding of how the system works, that is something that is missing. And through this research, you would see that they are going to discover a lot of things. You know, I was giving a class in Kampala some time back, and I was telling dancers to mention. I always, when I'm going to teach them, I first give them questions. And some of the questions are, I told them to write for me 5 choreographers from the continent they know. So I would tell any producer from Uganda to mention 5 producers from the continent they know.
Okay.
You know, and how do you get to talk to them? You know, when you talk to people and hear their stories, it also gives you a sense of, I'm not alone.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, I'm not alone in this, and there are people who have gone through what I've gone through. Yeah. So that also gives you the guts to keep on moving, you know.
Yeah, it's really true, yeah. So I know we would just say that research is a real big role in this. Yeah. And if you're an artist, you are there, you want to do collaborations, you want to do exchange programs, you need to research about where should you find such things.
Of course, because, you know, there are, for example, for artists, there are a lot of calls, for example, from Germany or from all over the world, where they would say, can you apply for this? You know, there is a residence here, we need an artist to apply, and you see that not a lot of artists will know about this.
I mean, if I may ask, why is it that there is a low research for some artists in the African continent? Maybe let's say in Uganda, where we know both of us. Why is there this less research?
Man, you know, I don't like the saying, but they always say it that when you want to hide the information from an African, you write it. You know, I don't like that saying because I know one of the greatest, one of the great writers are from the continent that have written very deep, you know, information like Chinua Achebe and you know, Oyinka, you know, and you know, we also have good writers in Uganda. We have writers in Kenya. You know, the list can go on and on. I don't know who brought up that thing, but at a certain point, I've come to realize that it is somehow true.
Yeah.
You know, it's somehow true because in a sense that I was talking to a Ugandan dancer and I asked him, how many books have you read about dance?
Yeah.
And they said none. And I'm like, okay, so imagine going to a doctor and you tell him that you're sick. You tell him the sickness and the doctor tells you, I don't know what is wrong with you. Or the doctor tells you, I don't know the sickness you're talking about.
Because of not having the information.
You feel like this doctor is not professional at all.
Yeah. So that is, I mean, that could be the capacity for people to read. Maybe someone doesn't know how to read. Maybe their books are in languages that they cannot read. Don't you think so?
It's not about only reading. There are a lot of documentaries. For example, I'll tell you from this perspective. There are a lot of documentaries on YouTube, on Vimeo, you know, and now Netflix has come, what. But you would see that a Ugandan artist or dancer will not find time to watch a documentary about Chinua Achebe on YouTube, but he will find time and they will be on Facebook scrolling, liking every photo he passes by.
Yeah.
And on his Instagram.
Yeah.
You know, but they will not get time to do research about such something. You cannot read, but at least you can listen. There are so many ways of learning.
Hear my true story.
So I want you to just, for our dear listeners, can you mention some of your projects, personal projects that you have produced, your works?
Oh, okay. So actually, I will tell you one funny thing. This is what people don't know. And I've also, I was talking to, you know, my wife also happens to be like my manager.
Yeah.
And I was talking to him last time. We were doing my schedule for this year.
Yeah.
And I discovered that I've not been producing my work independently.
Yeah.
But I've been doing collaborations, as you said.
Yeah, because I know that. Because I've been seeing you. I've been seeing you doing collaborations on the African continent, here in the European continent. Then you also do it in the US. And I'm like, man, this guy, how is he really coordinating these collaborations? Because it's not easy to find African artists able to run collaborations.
No, it's not easy.
Yeah.
It's not easy. And I know a part of it is political and economical, you know. But I will tell you some of the projects. I realized that when COVID broke out, I decided doing my own projects.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, it's time for me to start producing my own projects instead of only relying on collaborations that I've been doing. Because then I started producing my own work. But I will give you title and then give you a little insight about the work.
Okay, good.
So, the first work I did was You Judge.
You Judge, okay.
You Judge, as you hear it. And I developed this work way back when I was still in Senegal. And actually, I was even performing the piece 2 months ago in Berlin. And this piece really, as you hear it, you judge. This is what happens in the community, that people will judge you just looking at you as Otako, but they will not know the inner Otako.
Yeah.
So for me, with this piece, I really wanted to show people that I'm interested in people's interior rather than their exterior.
Mm.
On just, I don't care on how they look, how they have dressed, I
Yeah.
only care about their interior. And the sad thing is that we cannot always see the interior.
Yeah.
And it is sad, at the same time good, because when people judge you based on how you look, at times it also, for me, I'm like, it's good, you're just judging my exterior, but you've not seen my interior. So the interior for me is pure, and the exterior is, the interior for me is overrated, and the exterior it is the exterior that is overrated, and the interior is underrated.
Okay. I mean,
so yes.
Why did you choose to do this project? Was it based on your real personal story, or is it?
Yeah, I mean, it is based on my personal story. This is I think you've seen photos of me putting on the dress.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, so that's the project. Once I went to visit my mom, and then I went to visit my mom. I was like, I'm going to go to visit my mom for just 2 hours.
Yeah.
And I happened to stay over. So my mom stays in Nansara. Nansara is just like 30 minutes away from the city.
Yeah.
Or depending on the traffic. Can be less. So I went to visit her, and then I reached there, and I was just there for 2 hours, and I decided to stay. So I did not go with a lot of clothes. So I started to stay for the whole weekend. So I told my mom to give me one of these dresses.
Yeah.
To put on. And my mom was like, no, if you put it on, you don't get out of the house.
Yeah.
People are going to think this. And I'm like, Mama, but people are only going to see me putting on the dress. They will be judging me just because they have seen me putting on the dress. But they don't know who I really am. They don't know what I stand for,
Yeah.
They are just judging my exterior, but not who I am inside.
Yeah, I get that.
And so that's why that was the departure of the performance. A lot of my performances I get a lot of ideas from my mom, because my mom comes from that old generation, African mothers.
Yeah.
So I always have conversations with her, since my work also deals with decolonization.
Decolonization. So, yeah, that's your focus point. That's where you run your themes.
That's where. Yeah. So I have a lot of conversations. So the next work I've done was which one should I tell you about? I did another one called Going to Mars.
Going to Mars. Why?
So this work celebrated one of the African philosophers called Mukoka in Colosso. So I did this project with also the company that I work with in Berlin. So because of COVID, we decided to shoot the video. So to do the piece with video, the project had 120 artists.
Wow. So big number of artists.
Yeah, we did it during lockdown in Kampala. So I did this piece. So this piece celebrated Mukoka Nkoloso. Mukoka Nkoloso is an African philosopher, scientist, and one of my heroes. He is from Zambia. Mukoka, after the World War, he was a World War soldier, and after the World War, he convinced people that he's going to Mars. Imagine, this is even before Elon Musk talked about it.
Okay.
Well, yeah, so I was celebrating. I think it is very important as we Africans to also start telling our stories, so that the stories that we tell come from the horse's mouth.
Well, why do you think it's important? Why do you say that?
Telling our stories is like an attempt to tell stories that may have imprisoned us or enslaved us to live more of our spiritual or economical life.
Yeah.
So the more we tell our stories, we are releasing ourselves from the lies.
Yeah.
So I always tell people that my works are continuation. I'm always continuously, like I told you, I'm always investigating. So this is the next piece I did. I did another piece called The Arya Nation.
What does that mean?
The Arya Nation, so this piece talks about the city Kampala that I grew up in. So did you know that the city was designed by a German architecture?
I didn't know that. Tell us. Why a German architecture designed Kampala?
So that's what I was also asking myself. So when you are so like I said, this is why I always want to tell the stories. When I was young, you also, Otako, you can relate. You know the city very well. You know every corner of Kampala. Even if they drop you the next day, you will know where to go and where to pass, right? But what you don't realize is that the streets that you're passing on are named after the colonialists.
Yeah.
And in Kampala, they did May. He was called May something. He's a German architecture. So when he designed the city around 1930s to 1935, somewhere there.
Yeah.
So when he designed the city, he made something called the ring. And for those that are from Kampala can recognize that the ring, let's start from CPS.
Yeah.
Yeah? It was a circle. It is a circle. Then from CPS, go to Wandegea police station.
Yeah.
Then go to Chila police station. You see the circle?
Yeah, so it made kind of a city circled around.
A city circled around. And for them, as the colonialists, they lived in the circle.
Yeah, so they fenced themselves so they're inside the circle. And which people are outside the circle? Which people? The African
Let me tell
people.
you, this is how they did it. They made the circle, they lived in the middle, and on the boundaries of the circle, they had the Indians.
So on the boundaries, they put the Indians. The next people to live next to them, their neighborhood should be the Indians. Okay.
And this is why this circle is surrounded by ghettos. It's because this is where the people that worked for them came from.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean,
So
for
this is
for our listeners, to make it clear for them, is that Kampala city is not that it is on the surround. It is the city was developed in that the white people were within the center of the city. Then next to them were the Indians, and then after the Indians, then came the Ugandans.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's how they divided the classes. And then so I realized that when I realized that actually during COVID, because the city was empty and I got an opportunity to go around. I have a friend of mine who does tours and travel. So travel companies were allowed to move.
Yeah.
So he has a car and we used to go around because everyone was bored doing nothing. So we used to go around. And then I realized that I know this city very well, but these colonial structures are still active.
Okay.
You realize that people who live in Kololo will mention it very proudly.
Yeah.
I live in Kololo, and all of us will get intimidated because the guy lives in Kololo. So you see how colonization is transgenerational.
Yeah, I see that.
You understand? So that is the next piece I did. That can also be another conversation.
Oh, okay.
So I'll give you some of it. The other piece that I did around, what is the piece that I've done a lot sometimes.
You've done a lot, but anyway, you don't need to really finish it. We
but
can
so
just
far,
say,
I would say those are the some of the projects that I've done.
yeah. For our dear listeners, we shall maybe have some of these pieces listed down on this podcast so that you can really follow up and you can really get to read about them, because I'm sure they're online too.
Yeah, there are a lot of articles about some of my works.
Yeah.
And so you can find also extract videos on
YouTube.
The internet, on my Vimeo, and you also visit my website. You can see some of the things.
Yeah, and we shall put your Vimeo and your website on this podcast for the listeners to follow up you and find you. Yeah. Do you have anything else that you would like to say that we have maybe not talked about?
I don't know. We have talked about a lot.
Yeah.
We have talked about a lot. Maybe next time when I come back, we can choose a topic that we can go into. Maybe try to explain people more about like the manifesto of my work and why I think my work. Yeah. So
if you give me time, I can always have this conversation with you. Very much. Yeah. So would you like to say bye to our listeners? You can say bye to them in the best language you understand, whether in your local language or you can say it in English.
I'm always happy when I speak in my local language.
Yeah.
Because the reason why I'm always happy is that the funny thing is that I cannot read Luganda and I cannot even write it. Wow. And that makes me very sad when you go to Europe and you realize how people are very attached to their language.
Yeah.
It gives you the sense of there is something rich and deeper in a language than just speaking it or writing it, Yeah. But the preservation of it is very rich, So I would say banange neyanziza nnyo okumpita waneeno mukulu Otako webale nnyo kansubire oliddamu nonkyazaako n'abatuwuliriza mwebale nnyo mwebalire ddala.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Robert, for being with you on this podcast. And our dear listeners, you can follow Robert on various social media platforms. Robert, can you maybe mention your social media platforms, your contact where people can reach you if you wish?
Yeah, so if you go on Google, you just put Sempija Robert, you would see I have a website, and on Facebook I use Sylar Robert Sempija, Sylar with SYARL, and it's the same name I use on Twitter, on Instagram, everywhere.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Robert, and for that reason, I would like to say thank you. Thank you so much. And I'd like to say thank you for always tuning in. You can always check up on this podcast. You can follow the podcast. You can subscribe to the podcast. You can also share with your network. Tell your friends about this wonderful podcast if you enjoy listening to our stories. Thank you so much. Yeah.
We not only have voices for a podcast, but also faces for YouTube. Don't miss your next episode. Hear my true story.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, Music by Edwin Matovo, hosted and produced by Otako. Subscribe to our podcast for more stories and visit us on our website, hearmytruestory.com, for more stories. All the links are listed in the show notes of this podcast.